It seems like everywhere I look, there is an apartment building being built. It's like anywhere a developer can get a cheap plot of land and some tax credits, they're building a new apartment building. And here in one of the neighborhoods that I own 3 small apartment buildings in, there is probably 24 units being built. It's in a small 4-block by 4-block neighborhood, and it mostly consists of older apartment buildings built in the 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, and now they're building these new apartment complexes and adding to the available units that are on the market. And what they lead you to believe is that there is a housing shortage of some sort and we need more housing. And so they incentivize these builders to come in and build these properties. But the problem is they come into the neighborhood, they build these new properties. It's not cheap to do, and so they've got to charge these exorbitant amounts of rent. So for instance, some of these new apartment buildings are, they're just one bedroom units, and they're going to be charging probably over $1,200 a unit to rent these out. And this is in Tulsa, Oklahoma. Not a lot of people can afford that. So there ends up being all these vacancies on the market. This is one of them, actually, just right around the corner from me. And like I said, they lead you to believe that there's some kind of housing shortage. But in this neighborhood, despite all the building that's going on, there are still over 25 vacant units, and they're all over $900 a month. I personally have 7 vacant units, and mine are priced below $900 a month. My 1-bedrooms are $800 to $850, and I'm not getting any calls. 0 calls about, anyone leasing these apartments. So there may be a housing shortage, but the problem is it's an affordable housing shortage. If people just can't afford to pay these rents, then there's just going to be a ton of vacant units. It's going to have to take months and months of a downtrend for landlords lowering their prices month by month in order to get these rents down where people will actually be able to afford them again. Because on top of the high housing prices, there's inflation, there's tariffs, there's all these things that are weighing down on people's pocketbooks and keeping them from moving. And you might say, well, why don't you just go ahead and lower your rents now and get them filled? But the problem is it's not necessarily a good idea, because people have become so acclimated to these rental prices that when they actually see something that is priced well below where everyone else is, they literally will think that it's a scam, for one, or that it's just a dump, despite whatever photos you might have on the listing. So it becomes this double-edged sword where you're not trying to attract, the worst tenant in the world, and if you have it priced too low, you don't get anybody that thinks that you're serious anyways. And it might sound ridiculous, but I promise I've ran into this. Last year I had some apartments listed, and they were around the $800 a month range, and as a matter of fact in the same building, and I wasn't getting any calls whatsoever about it. And when I finally did get anybody that took a look, they would just show up and they'd say, yeah, I actually just wanted to take a look to see if it was actually real or not, because it didn't seem like it was legit. The price was just so damn low. So you run into a situation like that, and it's not like I can't afford to drop the prices. I'm not trying to gouge people. It's just that there becomes this point of diminishing returns where it's not going to matter anyways if you lower the price, and you're trying to, as all landlords do, you're trying to charge the market rate. I've always charged below the market rate in order to keep my units filled, but in a situation like this where, inflation and tariffs have just literally wiped everyone out. No one's even looking at the units at all. It's not a situation of the rent is too high or too low. It's a situation of zero people can afford to pay the rent, which becomes a huge problem for the economy. It's a sign of huge problems in the economy. This is actually one of the units that I have for a lease. Beautiful, beautiful apartment. You know, nice vinyl flooring. You may not like the gray. I don't really care. That's just, you know, how it is. It's very, very neutral. Granite countertops. Nice, giant fridge. You don't normally find this in just a regular old apartment building. An old apartment building like this. And nobody's calling about this. This is $850 a month. And here we are, probably 45 days after listing this, and I've gotten, I think, 3 inquiries about this. I'll pull up Zillow and show you what my neighborhood looks like so you can actually see what I'm dealing with over here. And this should be a really big sign to everybody. I know that this is just a small little microcosm of, you know, the whole United States, but I've been getting, you know, feedback from other people that I connect with online that have properties in Colorado, have properties in other parts of the United States, and they're saying virtually the same thing. So something is actually going on. I think that this is a huge problem that's not getting talked about enough. You know, a lot of people say, oh, well, this has been in the news for a long time. Yeah, it's been in the news that things are hard on people, but the actual repercussions of that have yet to actually make it to mainstream headlines. They're talking about, you know, prices being cut on homes for sale. That's one thing, but when people just can't afford to actually rent apartments, rent somewhere, that's a whole nother issue. And, you know, one of the things that's most striking to me is the fact that I prided myself on keeping my units priced reasonably. So anytime there would be some kind of economic downturn, I could weather the storm. You know, if someone is struggling financially and they're renting a house, well, what do they normally do? They normally say, look, we can't afford this house anymore. We need to move into an apartment. So here I am with my reasonably priced apartment, and it'll stay filled. So if I can't even do that in an economic downturn, then there's a huge problem. My business partner always tells me that the reason for this is the lack of supply going up. They're building all these apartment buildings. And, you know, he always says that it's a problem for the economy, and might always push back and say, well, those are $1,500 a month, $1,200 a month, so it actually isn't going to hurt us at all. You know, if I got a $700, $800, $900 a month apartment, and this $1,200 a month apartment can't get filled because someone can't afford it, they're going to look at me and they're going to rent my place. Well, that ain't the case. It's so hard on people right now that they literally can't afford the cheapest apartment, you know, without it being a complete dump, of course, on the block. So let me know what you think down in the comments below. You think that this is something that's about to blow up, or you think that maybe I'm just overanalyzing this? Let me know what you think.